I want to call the meeting to order of the Lower Moreland Board of School Directors for October 20th. Mr. Kazatsky, can you lead us in the pledge, please?
Yep. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Dr. David Heiser.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you to our community and our board members this evening who are joining us. My name is Dr. Scott David Heiser, Superintendent of Schools, and I want to welcome everyone to this evening's public meeting of the Board of School Directors. I would like to remind our board and members of the public that this meeting is being recorded and that a recording of the meeting will be posted on our school board website within 48 hours following this meeting. Additionally, I would like to announce that the school board did meet in a virtual executive session last evening, Monday, October 19th, for approximately 2 hours to discuss personnel and legal matters. So before we begin our presentations for this evening's meeting, I would like to read our announcement of this public school board meeting. And it reads as such, quote, "Due to the current disaster emergency declared by Governor Wolf and in consideration of the health and safety of the school community, notice is hereby given. The Board of School Directors of the Lower Moreland Township School District shall convene this public school board meeting on Tuesday, October the 20th, beginning at 7 p.m. via a virtual platform. Instructions on how to view the meeting virtually and to provide public comment and questions have been made available on our school district's website. There is a link posted on the school board page of our website that lists the public comment and questions for this evening. Public comments and questions were open for submission today beginning at 12 p.m. and were closed at 4 p.m., allowing time for our school board members to review all comments and questions prior to this meeting. The school district has also responded to all questions that were asked by our public, and those responses are included in the document, and the district also acknowledged receipt of all other public comments. Mrs. Martino, would you please take the roll call of the board?
Good evening.
evening.
Dr. Mary Cohen,
Present.
Mrs. Camille Baker,
Present.
Mr. Howard Patton,
Present.
Mr. Alan Steinberg,
Alan.
Mr. Steinberg,
Here.
Mr. Michael Berardi,
Present.
Mr. Stephen Geiger,
Present.
Mr. Eric Kazatsky,
Here.
Ms. Carol Natter,
Here.
and Mr. Lance Wolbransky. Okay, all are present except Mr. Wolbransky.
Thank you, Mrs. Martino. I'll take the roll call of the cabinet members and 3 building principals, along with our athletic director, who will all be participating in this evening's meeting. Mrs. Gaudo,
Here.
Mrs. Drennan,
Present.
Mr. McGuinn,
Here.
Mr. Giordano,
Here.
Dr. Hilt,
Here.
Mr. Miles,
Here.
Ms. Dilks,
Here.
Mr. Cole,
Here.
Mr. Highland.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Cohen, I believe you're going to recommend approval of the minutes.
Do I have a motion to recommend the approval of the minutes of September 15th, 2020 of the regular meeting as recorded and amended?
So move.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Second.
any additions or corrections? If not, move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? It's carried.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Cohen. So before we begin this evening's presentations, and we have some recognitions and presentations this evening, I just would like to recognize the continued significant challenges that we continue to face as a school district associated with maintaining any form of in-person and virtual instruction under a pandemic. And I think that became clear within a week's time. Between last Wednesday and today, the school district has 4 confirmed positive cases of COVID-19, which all appear to be attributed to household community contact. We were, our administration and nursing staff were involved with the county this morning, as we do have 3 of those cases in at Murray Avenue School, all of which, though, are not necessarily connected. We do not believe, in the county, through their investigation, do not believe there's any type of coordination of those cases inside the building itself. They are somewhat separated and are confident that they're singular, that the quarantining aspect has been underway, and that we're managing that in a safe way, that there's no transmission taking place inside our schools. So again, I would simply ask for our community members that are watching this evening or will be watching the recording, and for all of our staff and our students, it's highly, our ability to remain open for any in-person instruction, activities, programs is really dependent upon everybody and everyone's behavior involved. We're seeing, and I think nationally, along with Pennsylvania itself, is seeing a large uptick. Most of the media coverage is centering on small household gatherings and community gatherings that are taking place. We're in some beautiful weather right now in the fall time, and there's an uptick related, they believe, to a lot of those types of gatherings where we let our guard down, simply expand our bubbles, which may have been much more restrictive at one point in time, and therein the virus finds its way in. And as we've mentioned numerous times before, this is a highly transmissible virus. It can find a crack anywhere, and anyone and everyone are vulnerable to that. And our job as a school is to simply, as I've mentioned before, there's never going to be an opportunity for us to avoid the risk. There is always a risk of that transmission, but we can simply slow that. And we believe through our protocols right now, we're managing that. Even as cases come up, we don't believe they're being transmitted through our buildings in any way, shape, or form. Our masks, our distancing, our cleaning protocols, our hygiene mechanisms are all working very much so, but we're not immune to having those types of cases walk into our buildings, and then we need to manage those and work with our health department in managing them in numerous different types of ways. So again, for our board, and I think our board has been made well aware of our 4 confirmed cases, communications have gone up. We've also created a COVID-19 dashboard here in Lower Moreland, just kind of recording those, so anybody that gets confused by communications through time will have a record to go to, and we have those listed for everyone. So I do want to report from the board that, again, our safety protocols and our management systems that we're working to prevent and provide as much mitigation to slowing down this virus in any way, shape, or form are working. The health department actually noted that today for us and thought that we were doing a very good job when it came to those types of things, especially even though we were still having cases, there's no transmission associated to that. And they'll make the determination if they see those types of leaks or those types of transmissions that they believe may be happening in buildings. That's when they become pretty concerned, and that's when buildings could possibly be closed for periods of time in order for that incubation period to extend itself and exhaust itself so that we can safely reopen again. We're not at that point, but those are the types of things and conversations that we do have with them throughout any type of time period that we are working with them through the contact tracing process. Okay, so before we get into our 5-day elementary instructional models, we do want to recognize some students of the month. And begin that this month in October. And I would ask that Mr. Miles from the high school, our high school principal, begins with his presentation of this month's high school recipients. Mr. Miles.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. David Heiser, and members of the board for giving me some time this evening to recognize 2 students of the month for the month of September. And our first student is Doug Britton, grade 12. And if I may read the descriptors by the nominees. Well beyond his years in some ways, perhaps, Doug is a standalone student who demonstrates great resolve and self-reflection in times of uncertainty and struggle. He holds a great level of respect and rapport with many across the teaching staff, and his quick wit and humor can lighten up any dark or dull day. Doug's passion is to become a kindergarten teacher where he can impact a student's life during early stages of learning, as he often recalls the very positive impact teachers have had on his life, especially as a younger student. So I'd like to congratulate Doug Britton, our first student of the month. Our second student of the month is also a 12th grader, Nick Degliamini, and the nominator has this to say: I have known Nick since he was in 9th grade. Always a kind, courteous, pleasant, astute, confident student. His character has continued to develop during his years at Lower Moreland. He continues to be a role model to other students. Now that he is a senior, he is facing the disappointment of not being able to play a full season of football because of COVID. The football season will be only a shadow of what it would have been the culminating achievement of what he has hoped for since he started with the high school team. Nonetheless, when I spoke to him about it, he was positive and showed true sportsmanship. He is facing the situation with maturity and gratitude. And I could add to that, if anyone saw last weekend's game, Nick's number was observed all over the field. So great job to Nick and the rest of the team. And if I may also read the words on our certificate for each student, both Doug and Nick will receive this, and I will try to meet with each of our award winners on Thursday. Lower Moreland High School Student of the Month is recognized for academics, character, and integrity. We congratulate you and have confidence that your future will be equally successful. Again, on behalf of all the teachers and staff of the high school, I congratulate Doug. And
I just want to jump in here. This is Dr. Hill. Mr. Miles, I see Doug and Nick are on the call. And normally if we were in person, we would give the students of the month a round of applause. So I think this would be an appropriate time to do that since they're here. Well done.
Wonderful. Congratulations, gentlemen. Well achieved. All right, we're going to move on to our students of the month, and I'm going to ask Ms. Dilks, our Murray Avenue principal, to begin her presentation. Ms. Dilks.
Good evening. I'm really excited to be able to present our first two students of the month to the school board. I was just really encouraged by the comments that their teachers made about them through the nomination process. And I feel like for our middle school students in particular, we've really given them an opportunity to show what they can do as students, and the maturity and discipline and motivation being displayed by these two students in particular, I think is really impressive. So it's with great pleasure that I present them to you this evening. Our first student of the month is Shane Alden, and I'm going to share some of the remarks that his teacher shared about Shane. Shane comes to class every day with a smile. Shane is such a positive influence, always respectful to his teachers and peers. He actively engages in class lessons, whether he is in person or learning virtually. He actively participates and consistently makes insightful remarks and contributions to class discussions. Congratulations, Shane. And our second student of the month is Miss Eliana Rubin. And I'll share the remarks that her teachers shared about Ellie. Ellie has shown herself to be helpful and kind to her fellow students. She is hardworking regardless of which learning environment she is in each day. Ellie is extremely reliable and a motivated student. She is eager to learn each day and always puts forth 110%. Watching her grow over the years has been amazing. And I would also add about Ellie, if you see her wherever she is, you can always tell that she is smiling through her mask because she's just that kind of a kid. So congratulations, Ellie. We're proud, Shane and Ellie, we're very proud of both of you for the work that you're doing.
Congratulations, Shane and Ellie. Are they all joining us this evening, Ms. Dilks? Do we know if they're on the call? Dr. Hilt?
They have been invited, so I believe.
Okay, well, if you're out there in virtual world, congratulations to the two of you. All right, we're going to shift then to Pine Road Elementary and Mr. Cole and his presentation of our Student of the Month for October.
Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Recognizing our students is one of the most important things we can do. So it's great to hear about our wonderful high school and Murray Avenue students. But I'm here tonight and I'm honored to share the recognition of one of our youngest learners. Our Student of the Month at Pine Road is a kindergartner named Max Breen. So I was thrilled to receive this nomination, especially because he was nominated after only a few actual in-person days in school. And in that very brief period of time, his teacher and I have both been impressed by the amazing sense of kindness, empathy, and willingness to support his classmates that Max has shown in a very brief period of time. He's always helpful of his peers. He's always willing to help academically, social, emotionally, and perhaps most importantly in this time from a safety perspective, and is always quick to offer a friendly reminder of students to follow safety protocols, and is always very mindful to offer his assistance to students and remind himself and others that he has to help them from a socially distanced distance. So he is a treasure and something that we are very proud of in Lower Moreland and specifically at Pine Road. I do believe Max is on the call, so great job, Max.
Congratulations, Max. All right, I believe that's our Student of the Month, our recognition. So we're going to shift into our other presentation for this evening, which is titled 5-Day Elementary Instructional Model Scenarios. And this next presentation, which I've charged, this is Julian Drennan, our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Professional Development, and Mr. Cole, our Pine Road Principal, and which they've worked very diligently over the last 2 weeks in really putting together a number of different possible scenarios related to 5-day elementary in-person instructional models. So our charge has always been as we want to continue to look for ways to improve upon our teaching and learning delivery systems throughout this year. And we turned our attention most importantly to our most vulnerable learners first, and looking at some of our primary learners as possible scenarios to shift to a 5-day instructional model. So tonight, Mrs. Drennan, Mr. Cole will be sharing some of that information related to increasing in-person opportunities. And I'm going to ask that I believe they're going to be taking over the screen and sharing from this point forward.
Okay, good evening. Mr. Cole is going to start us off this evening with a brief introduction.
Good evening, everybody. As Ms. Drennan said, I will start us off. So as Dr. David Heiser alluded to, we are going to present you with a few scenarios that we've explored as different ways that we could potentially increase our in-person instruction. I think it's important to reiterate the points that Dr. David Heiser made in his introduction. This is part of a constant reflection and looking at ways that we could potentially increase the amount of in-person instruction available to our youngest learners. Certainly, we want this to be in recognition of the fantastic job that our staff has done in providing an education in this pandemic environment, but as part of our constant searching to make sure that we're offering the best we can. These are scenarios that we've explored. Go ahead, Ms. Drennan, we can.
Yeah, we've taken time to figure out what we can capitalize on in terms of lessons learned thus far, as well as continue to explore sort of the good to great model, So in the weeks since August 31st, people have made market improvement. And we think the next step to meeting students where they are and moving them along would be to look to our youngest learners and see what we can do about extending more in-person instructional time.
So just to add a little bit to that, so the justification for this planning is really in recognition that we know that our youngest learners, in this case elementary students, stand to benefit from an increased in-person learning, and that's due to several factors. And I want to be really clear. I don't think it's necessarily due to what we're offering. I continue to be impressed by what our teachers are able to offer, but I think we recognize that our youngest learners exercise a little bit less independence. In addition to that, they are less familiar with some of the technology that they're being asked to utilize, as well as, and perhaps most importantly, our youngest learners are still developing those school behaviors. So unlike some of our older students that have not had those years of school experience, many of our students, and I think of our kindergartners in particular, are really just learning what it means to do school. So those behaviors are very important to develop, and they're challenging to develop in the current environment. In addition to that, as well as developing social skills, we know that learning is very much a social endeavor, and the development of some of those social skills and those habits of mind are very important and provide a challenge for some of our youngest learners in the current environment. As well as it's difficult for our students at the elementary level to balance the multiple resources and platforms that they're being asked to balance as part of their educational experience, whether that be our curricular materials that exist online, or whether that just be some of the other platforms that are being utilized to make sure that we're offering them the most that we can. So as we looked at these scenarios, and on the next slide, I'll give you a little bit of a quantification of the scenarios that we've looked at. There are some really key considerations that we felt that had to be considered and had to remain at the forefront of the consideration. So as we begin to dive into some of these scenarios, I wanted to make sure that the board and the public was aware of some of the main considerations that Ms. Drennan and I, as well as the rest of the administrative team, really kept at the forefront. One of those was, we felt at this time it was very important to maintain the integrity of the 6-foot distancing and safety protocols. Dr. David Heiser alluded to it in his introductory comments earlier, how important those have been and how even the health department has recognized that those have really gone a long way to help us make sure that our students are safe. So that was something that we really wanted to make sure that we maintained. In addition to that, at the elementary level at Pine Road, we've really eliminated much of the larger congregation of our students and really limited the transfer of students to different spaces in the buildings, opting instead to move adults. But one of the areas that we know that we have a large congregation is obviously our lunchroom. So we wanted to be very mindful of the capacity limits within our lunch space while maintaining that 6-foot distance. We also really wanted to make sure that we were balancing the need of our students with the capacity of the building. As you know, Pine Road is the largest school in the district, so there are quite a few students in the building. We wanted to make sure that we were mindful of the students that had the most need, but also recognizing that the capacity of the school is somewhat limited in the number of students we can return and maintain that 6-foot distancing. We also, in similar fashion, wanted to make sure that we were focusing those resources then on those most vulnerable learners. So who are the students that would benefit the most from that increased in-person instruction? We also really wanted to make sure that we collaborated with professional staff to make sure that we refined the model. So as Ms. Drennan and I looked through the scenarios, we started from a very high level look and really did not apply any value judgment, so to speak, on any of the scenarios, but really just kind of looked at the feasibility of many different scenarios. And once we had identified those scenarios, we collaborated with the professional staff at Pine Road to really make sure that we heard what was working for them, where their students were struggling, and how we could refine our practice and make sure that whatever plans we made moving forward would be supportive of them in delivering the caliber of education that we expect at Lower Moreland. And lastly, we felt it was important in this environment, and this is in recognition of the fact that all of this is happening in the backdrop of a global pandemic, to make sure that for our families, we maintained that virtual option for all grade levels in all scenarios. So the scenarios that we looked at were wide ranging. We explored options for K-5 returns, K2 returns, as well as K1 returns to increased in-person instruction. We looked at 12 distinct scenarios, and those scenarios all had varying degrees of in-person learning, hybrid/virtual learning, but with only one platform. So that being the purely virtual learners existing on a separate platform than just the hybrid students, as well as a hybrid virtual scenarios where we maintain that separate virtual only student as well. So that model would look similar to how we've been operating thus far this year. As we explored these scenarios, we looked at some of the metrics on those scenarios under three main conditions. One of those being approximately 70% of students physically in the building, very close to where we are today. We then looked at what the impact would be if we returned 80% of our students to in-person learning, as well as 85% of students to in-person learning. In addition to the varying degrees of those different scenarios, within each scenario, we also looked at potential adjustments to the day. So what would a shortened day look like? What would an AM, PM split look like? What would the feasibility be in those different scenarios? On top of that, there was staffing requirements, obviously were a consideration. Because we looked at such a wide range of scenarios, the staffing requirements ranged from no additional staff to the need to add an additional 36 teachers. So that kind of, we covered the full spectrum there. And again, some other considerations was, as we looked at each grade level and each section of the building, there are some variance in square footage in different wings of the building. So that had an impact on the capacity of students that we could safely return while maintaining that 6 feet. We also identified that there would be some additional storage needs if we're recapturing square footage. Currently, as you may recall, we did eliminate many extra furnishings from classrooms and extra materials from classrooms. Those are currently stored in some additional spaces. So we would need to find some storage solutions in order to regain some of that square footage. Additionally, we would need to do some furniture reallocation from current classrooms if we were to create new spaces for students. And again, just a constant consideration of some of the capacity limitations. So just the physical amount of space that we have in order to safely return an increased number of students.
So a number of the things that we considered, we are bringing to you tonight. We're showing you what the financial burden is that the district would incur to sustain any of these shifts or changes. We also have a recommendation if we were to move forward to try and bring more students into the building. With all the different scenarios considered, we do have a recommendation for you to consider that we think would optimize meeting students where they are, meeting their needs, as well as being fiscally responsible. One other consideration that we'd like to bring to you tonight is the consideration to put teachers on one platform. Currently, all of our teachers are live streaming instruction to their students who are learning virtually. And some of those students are learning virtually because they're hybrid students and spend some time in the classroom, and other students are virtual only. There would be some advantages to splitting the hybrid teachers and having the hybrid students with specific teachers, and then peeling off the virtual students and assigning them to a single teacher. The way that the lessons are delivered, the efficiency with which that can occur would increase if this were the case, because right now the students who are at home have to kind of live through the protocols of in-school health and safety measures. There's also the issues of materials, distribution of them, and being able to separate them could impact the effectiveness of the instruction in the room. So if we were to shift in just grades K-2 to being a single platform, we would need to hire an additional teacher for each one of those grade levels to incur the enrollment shifts that, not enrollment shifts, but the attendance shifts of hybrid versus the virtual. If we were to make that shift on November 30th, which is just shortly after Thanksgiving, the total cost for all K-2 teachers would be $166,000 and change. And then if we were to do that in K-5, which would require a few additional teachers, including 2 teachers at grade 5 because of the enrollment, it would be $388,906. So this isn't necessarily in reference to bringing more students into the building, but it is something for the board to consider in terms of the delivery of our current program. In terms of increasing in-person instruction, the first thing we looked at was kindergarten solely. Knowing that they're our youngest learners for all the reasons that Mr. Cole just outlined, the fact that they're learning school behaviors, socialization, they're working on fine and gross motor skills still, having them in school makes a lot of sense. So if we were to move to K-5, and maintain grades 1 through 5 in their current delivery model, where the teacher is responsible for both the hybrid and the virtual students at once, we would need 6 additional staff members, and the total cost for that is listed on the slide as well. Mr. Cole and I also were very mindful of, as new teachers are hired, where will they go? How will we find classrooms for them? There is a plan for recouping space throughout the building in order to have reasonable classrooms for each one of the additional staff members. Scenario number 2 has us looking at bringing back KN1. So one of the things we've talked about is that our first graders had a truncated year in kindergarten experience and still need additional time to recoup and recapture some of those learnings that would have occurred in person last spring. So what would happen if we were to get both K and 1 back in person for 5 days and then leaving grades 2 through 5 in their current delivery model, where the teacher is managing both their hybrid and virtual? This would yield a need for 12 additional teachers, 10 additional classrooms outside of what we currently have allocated to KN1. There is a cost difference if we were to do that in November versus waiting to the second semester, and that's listed here for your consideration on the slide as well.
Mrs. Drennan,
Yes.
can you go back to that slide for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Why is there such a big difference between semester 1 and semester 2?
Dr. David Heiser, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. It's a good question because it is a significant difference, as you can see. So some of which is there's approximately 37 days between, working days between. So obviously there's less time, which is going to incur less cost. However, there's also a significant difference due to the fact that under the current labor agreement that the board has with Lower Moreland Township Education Association, the Teachers Association, requires that if we were to hire any teacher for longer than a half of a year, so for longer than a semester, which a semester includes 2 marking periods, that teacher would need to be brought in and hired on the salary schedule as per the labor agreement. However, outside of the labor, outside of that, if we were to hire a long-term substitute to teach for a semester or less, it allows us to hire an individual outside of the current contract, which we can do at a more economical rate when you're talking about a salary and benefits that would be significantly different from which it is inside the labor agreement. So that's why in which there is a significant cost differential, some of which is what I described, and some of which is obviously less time. If we were to start in the second semester, it's less days to pay.
You mean third semester, correct?
No, semester is 2 marking periods put together. So it would be the semester 2 is the start of the 3rd marking period.
Right. So basically, if we started in the beginning of the 3rd marking period, the cost would only be $270, correct?
The cost for this scenario for 12 teachers,
right?
We have it coming in at that $270,000,
right?
And that would be, I believe, the marking period would start on the 22nd of January. There's a Friday. We're proposing that we would start that on, and we calculated based on Monday, January 25th through the end of the school year.
Right, but if they started on November 30th, it would be the 666.
As of right now, it would be that due to the nature of the additional days between January 25th and back dating to November 30th. Plus the requirement under the current labor agreement that we would need to hire an individual that would be teaching longer than a full semester, therefore hire them on the inside the contract as per the labor agreement.
Does grades 2 through 5, hybrid virtual, are they also on the one platform, or are they going to continue to stay on the dual platform?
In this scenario, they would stay on the dual platform. So we do have a scenario where they do break out into the single platform. It's obviously more costly, but that slide is coming as well.
All right,
Okay.
well, go ahead, Ms. Drennan. Maybe we'll come back to that, I guess. I didn't want to interrupt too much. Thank you.
So you'll see as we go, Mr. Berardi, each one of these next examples splits it out from a semester one implementation versus waiting till the third marking period.
Ms. Drennan, this is real quick. This is Eric Kazatsky. If you can go back to that last slide, what is the cost differential factoring out the days? Like, what's just the labor difference in the expense? So I know we have like an extra 30 days. If we add that back in, what's the true difference in contract versus non-contract?
So let me jump in there, Mr. Kazatsky. So we have that calculated roughly as a differential. We see as a cost of, and again, you know, any contractor beholden to the labor agreement. The only way that we would be able to go outside of that labor agreement would be to enter into some sort of agreement that we would, and the association would allow us to hire outside that. As of right now, we do not have that agreement, but we calculate that at approximately $381,000.
All right, wow, that's a lot. I mean, what kind of agreement were you referring to?
I'm sorry, the labor agreement that.
Well, you said unless you said like an agreement like outside of the.
Okay, sorry. Yes, typically it would be a standard MOU, a memorandum of understanding, something to suggest that we could, you know, for this particular purpose, for this particular year, under these circumstances of a worldwide pandemic, allowing us to create some solutions that are a bit atypical and seeking some relief outside of the labor agreement for this period of time. We would have to enter into some sort of memorandum of understanding to be able to do that, and to be able to hire at what we believe would be a significantly lesser cost.
All right, sorry, that's just helpful when we look at the different scenarios. You know, you can sort of factor out what the days are and what the labor difference is. Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to, so Dr. David Heiser, is that something that we can ask the association to enter into?
Yeah, we've gone down in that conversation already. Right now, we don't necessarily have an agreement toward that. We're still asking if they would be amenable to that. I'm still waiting back for some follow-up asks of what I had. So I can't give you a clear picture of that tonight. And we certainly wanted to present to you tonight the impacts to it if we could not enter into any sort of memorandum of understanding, and what the real cost would be if we did have to enter into and abide by what the labor agreement currently says. My hope is that soon I will be able to get more answers and follow up for you as a school board as to what their final declaration may be with regard to that. I do not have that this evening for you.
What do you think is the timetable? Because I'm assuming if that's in this, you said, I think November 30th is the day we will be looking to go to some type of enhanced in-person. How long of a lag time do we have? And maybe Mrs. Drennan or Cheryl can speak this. How long does it take us to try to find these 12 teachers?
So our purpose behind November 30th, and again, I don't want to steal time away from Mrs. Drennan and Mr. Cole, but you know, at the end, and why we're associating November 30th, we thought presenting some of this evening with the possibility of getting some response from the association, you know, hopefully within days, or at least by the end of this week, possibly. It would give you as a board an opportunity over the next 2 weeks to evaluate this, consider the costs, consider what we're presenting to you and the impact that it has on our teaching and delivery systems. And our suggestion this evening would be, if the board so chooses to move forward with any of the scenarios or suggestions, or even our recommendation that we will deliver to you tonight, that would be something that we would look to ask you to call a special meeting, and we would suggest prior to the work session meeting on November 5th. And that would allow us, if the board so chooses to approve a scenario, we believe would allow us enough time, based on the recommendation we're going to be making this evening, to hire the necessary staff, prepare classrooms, make the transfers, and do everything we need so that we can start immediately following the Thanksgiving holiday break and start that Monday, which would allow us almost 7 weeks of instruction prior to the end of the second marking period, which is significant for some of our early learners. And we really evaluated that. We didn't want to present something that we couldn't come through on, and we believe we're with that time frame and that planning, we could deliver on any of the scenarios that we currently have, and most especially the recommendation that Mrs. Drennan and Mr. Cole will be making.
But this is clearly a potentiality that requires a lot of thought and understanding of the environment that we're going to be surrounded by.
Well, we've already given significant thought. We've also entertained as many thoughts from staff as we can when we evaluated this. This will take thought on your part as a school board to evaluate. However, what we're not changing are any of the safety protocols or structures. So what we are maintaining is that 6-foot distancing, and we feel that's valuable and certainly very important in what's gotten us to where we are now, which we don't believe we're seeing transmission of the virus in our schools. We're seeing it show up, but not being transmitted through schools. So that was highly important for us in thinking through this. So from that standpoint and lens, we're maintaining all those types of same things. Yes, will it have students in school 5 days, but we still maintain all the distancing and all the safety protocols based on our recommendation.
Scott, can you get back to us by the end of the week with regard to the answer from the union?
I will. I'll try my best, and I'll impress upon them the need to try to have an answer as quickly as possible. I can't promise you anything, but I'll try to get that as quickly as I can. So while we have
Dr. David Heiser, just real quick, I mean, is it, I know this is asking you to sort of project a little bit, but in your opinion, would they really care if we're trying to get kids back in the classroom safely? Would they really care what new teachers are being hired at, whatever rate that is? I mean,
well, I think it's a labor agreement that an association has with you as an organization, and I think that's highly important to them. I think that weighs heavily on their decision making when it comes to that. You know, I can't go much deeper into that. Those are conversations internally that their association has in presenting with them with the value, what we believe as a district is value added and benefit, and doing things in the safest way to increase some of our earliest learners' instructional time and face-to-face, in person, also getting some of our teachers to one platform, as well as those same students onto one platform, and maintain 6-foot distancing, are all really value added things that we can benefit. They come at a cost, and you're being presented with some of those cost structures this evening. So there's a lot to evaluate for them as a union, as an association and union. Those are some value things that they have to consider, and, as well as their labor agreements that they have with you. So I don't want to speak on their behalf. Those are decisions that they need to make, but we can present them and have presented them with some options to this and some things to think about. So we will try to get an answer back as quickly as we can, based on some decisions that they may have to make based on some of these types of scenarios.
So Dr. David Heiser, it's Michael Berardi. So you're saying that you presented the association with that agreement or change to that agreement, and we're just waiting to hear back from them?
Yeah, we're at a point right now, some things have been presented. Again, we have a lot of different scenarios here. So, giving them an exactness to what we couldn't, this is a presentation that had to really happen first, but that we went down the conversation pathway of what if, and if these were to be opportunities for us to be able, would you be inclined to be motivated to create a memorandum of understanding outside the contract. So we're waiting on a clarifying answer to that, and still waiting for that particular answer at this point in time.
All right, so just so I understand this correctly, we would maintain 6-foot distancing in all the scenarios?
Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and this would include taking well, I guess there's different scenarios, but the goal is to take at least some of the grade levels off of the dual platform?
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, some of this seems a little bit premature. 2 weeks ago, we had no students with the virus. 2 weeks later, we have 4 students with the virus. Does that mean in 2 weeks we have 8 students with the virus and then 12? I mean, a lot of this is out of our control, and we need to kind of sit back and watch and see, while we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, what's going to occur in the general community.
But Alan, we have been sitting back and watching, and we don't have community spread within the schools. These are all outside occurrences that just happen to be impacting some school students. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but if we just continue to sit back and wait, we're going to find ourselves in June and the school year will be over.
And a lot of children may be safer.
Or we may not have any issues. It could go either way.
That's correct.
Okay.
I think what's important to understand is the significance to all of our protocols, and in every scenario, and what I asked and charged Mr. Cole and Mrs. Drennan is to look at scenarios that maintain the 6-foot distancing. That has been highly important to us as an administration to consider. It's highly important to all of the recommendations coming out of the Department of Education, out of the CDC, and out of the Office of Public Health in Montgomery County. It's been important for our staff, and it's been very important for many of our families as well. And that becomes somewhat restrictive, because obviously schools aren't built to deliver on those types of platforms at 6 foot. It's more efficiency that schools have been. So this rubs in that. But being able to deliver on all of those safety protocols, we really do believe is making and will continue to make the difference for transmission. And obviously, yes, we are seeing in a week's time, we've seen 4 cases, but we don't believe they're being transmitted this way. Let me allow Mrs. Drennan and Mr. Cole to go through the rest of the scenarios, and then we'll take any more questions toward the end of this presentation. But I wanted to make sure that we share with the board and any of the public all of the scenarios that were kind of top of their list, and then make some recommendations to the board this evening to consider.
Okay, another option that we looked at was having the K-1 students come back for 5 days in person, and then also seek ways to improve the conditions.
This is the nice thing about it.
And we could do that by offering them the single platform. That will require 6 teachers. If we were to do that right away in November, the cost is there. If we were to defer that until the beginning of the second semester, it's a significant savings for the reasons that have been outlined. Another option would be to approach this in different phases, and this would mitigate some of the concern over the financial impact. So if we were to bring back kindergartners for 5 days in-person instruction on that November 30th date that has been referenced before, and then delay the return of first graders until the beginning of the 3rd marking period, which would be the 25th of January, and leave grades 2 to 5 on the current delivery model that they have now, with teachers managing both the hybrid and the virtual. We would be able to kind of, responsibly manage some of the impact of the cost. And so that would bring us down considerably, as well as get both K and 1 in. In phase 1, we'd be looking at hiring 6 teachers. And then for the second semester, which is the beginning of the third marking period, we would need to hire 6 additional teachers. So when we looked at all the different scenarios, and as we referenced earlier, they range from K-5 all back in 5 days to maintaining hybrid in some grades and not in others. We landed on a phased-in approach because we thought that it was a more responsible approach in terms of the greater concern for the cost. And that would mean phasing in grades K and 1 as described, and then also recommending that grade 2 be placed on one platform. That would mean that a virtual teacher would be added to the second grade team in order to handle just virtual only, and then leaving grades 3 to 5 in their current delivery model. So it would mean that we would hire 8 teachers in phase 1. One of the things that we're cognizant of is that if we were to shift to any of these scenarios, a number of our students would have to be reassigned to new teachers. And to be able to do that earlier than later in the year would be beneficial for students and the ability for the teacher to build the classroom community. So if we were to peel the virtual students off right at the very beginning so that they could reestablish that learning environment, we would hire 8 teachers in phase 1 and then 5 teachers in phase 2. This would provide for one platform in grades K to 2. As referenced before, they are the least independent of all of our elementary learners. The technology is new to them. Second graders are new with Chromebooks because they had iPads last year, and they're needing more adult support in order to navigate. It allows for the in-person instruction for our youngest learners. And I think another thing that would be very beneficial is for the teachers to be able to craft lessons for a specific group of students that share the same learning location. There are challenges in crafting lessons that are appropriate for both the virtual and the in-person, or sometimes needing to deliver 2 different lessons simultaneously and differentiate it based on their learning location. We would be able to be more efficient in our delivery of curriculum and the management of the resources that go along with the learning. We would be able to bring K and 1 back in and still maintain the number of classroom spaces needed at Pine. You all are very aware that Pine is very crowded to begin with. We would have enough space in the building to bring back both K and 1. And as I mentioned before, this is sort of middle ground in terms of the financial impact and in making a decision to add additional staff to bring students in for more days.
Julian, if the association agreed to allow us to hire teachers outside the contract, that amount would probably be half or a little more than half. Isn't that correct?
Yes. So the cost savings is significant if you were to be able to hire them outside of the contract. That is for certain.
Right.
And you can, well, I don't know if we have any straight numbers on the slides of what exactly the savings is, but I think Dr. David Heiser was trying to figure that out in the background a little bit earlier. It is.
He had a genius speech and we all just missed it.
Yeah, I was muted as well. So, Dr. Cohen, it's about a 40% difference.
Right.
The 2 numbers you see on your screen right now, the
Right.
666 and 270, and even those numbers are different. They don't tell the real tale because obviously there's less days from one semester to the next, but roughly speaking, it's about a 40% difference in cost structure.
So on the 556, it would probably be 356. That's about
Well,
a little bit, you're going to be upwards of, we're talking 13 teachers. We're in the $400,000 range versus the 556, 557 that you see there.
Well, that's not 40%.
well, because Barry, I think what we're missing, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, that's right. There's a second group. You're right. Okay.
If
Right.
we're able to get this agreement by the union, would we then not stagger it, not do it in phase 1 and phase 2? We would try to bring K and 1 back
Yes.
all on November 30th, right?
Right.
And that's the difference in cost, because we're taking 5 teachers in this model at a less expensive rate
Right.
in the second semester. So
Right.
overall, on a teacher, it's about a 40% difference.
Right.
What we're proposing and trying to come to an agreement outside of the contract with the association. So,
Right.
Like I said, I can't give you an answer to that. I will try to see how quickly I can get a response to whether they'd be willing for an MOU outside the contract, a labor agreement.
So, but the teachers that are currently teaching would not be affected salary, I guess, for, this would only affect
This
the
would be
teachers that we hire through.
This
the
would be
agencies.
typically you enter into a memorandum of understanding that is something that you agree to. Typically, it's a time period. So the time period is obviously what we're proposing to be a November 30th to the end of the school year. It's for a specific reason to have a solution for particular problems that we're seeing, and we're seeing that with some of our early learners and all the things that you've heard this evening. So it's an agreement to do something extraordinary outside of the labor agreement that currently exists. Everybody inside that labor agreement now, the teachers that are teaching now, they remain where they are. This would be us in order to hire some teachers at a more economical rate for our district, for our budget, to be able to employ this type of system through the end of the year. But I've had Mr. Cole and Mrs. Drennan look at it from different lenses as well and offer solutions that if an agreement could not be made to enter into an MOU, to look at it in an economical way where we could phase. And this is what we're delivering in our recommendation for you tonight, which we think is a little bit more satisfying financially. We certainly don't have our grade 1 students in at the time period that we would want to have them in, which would be November 30th. They would have to wait an additional 7 weeks to bring them in, just due to the cost structures to make this somewhat approachable from a financial lens.
Wouldn't you also say, because I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I think the kids come first. And if there's ways we can handle it in our budget, we should do it. My concern is if August of next year, we are at the same position we are today, I don't believe we would be able to do this because it's for a whole year financially, because of the index and how much taxes could be raised. Would you say that's?
Yes, Dr. Cohen, I think what we're looking at, and we're not even looking into the 21-22 school year. This is simply a problem that we have currently in this particular school year that we're trying to address. I would not want to apply it against the budget for a year to come. And again, in COVID era right now, information and things are changing so readily that our staffing situation, to be able to figure that out this winter, this spring, is going to be difficult, and not necessarily something we're going to be delaying as long as we can till we have the greatest indication as to what might be on the landscape for us to begin next school year. I would not suggest that we entertain or think about what the impact would be for next year. This is really, I would ask, and a little bit opposite of most superintendents thinking, but in COVID, we have to do some of that at times, and that we're going to look a little bit more short-sighted at the here and the now, trying to problem solve some areas that we want to address on the teaching and learning landscape. We will address that budget for the following school year and have some planning and trying to do that in the most economical way. But I would not want to promise to families just because if we did go down a pathway of this approach, that this would be a guarantee in years to come. Right now, it's just so much uncertainty under COVID that we don't even know where we're going to be come August, September next year in terms of the landscape.
Yeah, just a comment about the tax burden. I think that most parents would be happy to pay a little extra if it came to a slightly increased tax rate to have their children in school 5 days and to have them in these classrooms of maybe a dozen kids each. But what we have to keep in mind is that parents are such a small minority of the taxpayers in Lower Moreland. That we're looking at maybe 70% of the households who don't have children in school. So for them, it's a burden really without any benefit. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying it's not worth the expense, just a thought.
And Carol, I'll add that, we are, this understanding, I would imagine when the spirit of the agreement was when business and life was normal. And we weren't hiring 8, 13, 15 teachers. We were hiring 1 and 2 because students were in school. They weren't home for 3 months. And now to start a new year, they're home for 3 days of the week. So this is extenuating circumstances. And even to the taxpayers with a higher tax increase, they're struggling as well. So even the ones who would want the K-1 students who'd want to be 5 days, they're probably not all in agreement either if their taxes go up. So I really hope, because the spirit of the agreement probably wasn't considering a pandemic. So that's my comments there.
Thank you.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out a reason why this wouldn't happen. I mean, I'm optimistic. I can't imagine one reason why, if we're maintaining the 6-foot distancing, taking the teachers, a majority of the teachers off the dual platform for everything that I'm hearing has been the most challenging part. And they're not being, affected financially. I can't think of a reason why they would say no, to be honest with you.
Mrs. Drennan and Mr. Cole, I believe you have a slide or two left in your
Yes, we do have 2 more. An acknowledgement of the opportunities that something like this holds for us, as well as some of the obstacles. So let's do the obstacles first. We would have additional riders on the buses, so it would be important for families to know that. Mr. McGuinn has worked very carefully with First Student to limit the number of riders on, and we've been benefiting from the hybrid having an impact on enrollment in any one day. It's also important to know that as we're maintaining approximately 12 students in each classroom, that a good number of students will have a teacher assignment change in order to make this possible. So as the new teachers are identified, we would have to go through class rosters, and a good number of students would likely be reassigned. We would be creating a number of new classrooms, and Mr. Cole already spoke to the need for additional storage. But for those pain points, we get increased in-person instruction with the maintenance of 6 feet. K-2 would be focused on one platform, which would be very beneficial to them. And this all adds up to more instructional time. So when you think about the technology challenges that students are having at home, and teachers are trying to manage and deal with that, that then takes away from instructional time for hybrid kids. And then when the cleaning protocols and different things happen in the classroom, that's taking away instructional time from the students who are in our virtual settings. So the opportunity to split those platforms is really of great benefit for all students. In terms of the concerns from hiring, Mrs. Galdo provided this information. I'm sure she could speak to it if you needed her to, but the one thing about the timing with making these changes and possibly moving to 5-day is that it coincides with the end of the Families First Corona Response Act. So we have a number of teachers that are on leave, and those leaves will be coming to an end. And when those teachers return to their classrooms, the substitutes that we currently have in those classrooms, we would hope would be willing to stay with us and take one of our new classrooms for K or 1. And Mrs. Galdo is working very hard to figure out additional ways to meet the needs in terms of staffing, including posting for anticipated openings and not waiting until the day they're available, as well as applying for emergency permits for teachers. So we think we have a strategy that would allow us to find the teachers that would be required to move to a K or a K1 5-day model. And we are interested to know what you think about that possibility.
I think it's a good program. I have some concerns with teachers who are not certified yet, but since we have 6 coming back, what does it mean? We only need 6 other teachers, new teachers?
Well, I guess it depends on which model we arrive at.
Well, let's say the model you had, kindergarten starting the 30th, the other first grade starting in January, and moving to one platform, unless we can get a memorandum of understanding from the teachers, we could bring them back all at the same time.
Yeah.
Well,
So if we were seeking 13 teachers, we have those 6 that are already with us. The other thing to think about is other surrounding districts have those same type of leaves that will be expiring in the same time frame. So there should be additional qualified, certified teachers looking for positions going forward.
And I would also suggest that we've had great success. This has been an extraordinary year, and with a number of inordinate types of leaves and unusual situations. And we've had great success with hiring Mrs. Galdo, the team administrators, and hiring folks quickly. And we've really landed on some really wonderful quality folks and are doing just extraordinary things and walking in. So the preparatory programs have done well in getting those folks ready. A lot of these new teachers, some of which were student teaching during the closure period, actually really benefited them in that they really managed the technology lens quite well and had some experience in that dual platform type of situation, or at least singular platforms, in some of the spring. So we really took some time to look at this and evaluate this. And again, we never wanted to bring a recommendation to you that one that we don't believe we could fulfill. And when you're hiring and you're dealing with space and you're dealing with technology, they're all highly important, and you have to get it right. So we're confident in our ability to deliver on the types of things. One outstanding question is just a little bit of the value financially, to which I will certainly try to have an answer later in the week to the board as to whether the association would agree to a memorandum of understanding or not. And then the board can make some considerations as to what you want to do from there.
Thanks for that clarification.
So again, just as Mrs. Drennan, I guess you can stop sharing the screen. Again, what my recommendation would be to the board is for you to consider what we've shared tonight. We will send you this PowerPoint just so you have the information in your hands as well for you to consider. I will get back to you with an answer as to what upon your request of the MOU. Hopefully later this week, and then consider if the board so chooses, there could be a meeting called, and I would recommend a special meeting possibly in front of the work session meeting that's already scheduled, to consider and to hear and see any public comment that might be on any action item, if you want to take a look at any of those scenarios and actually bring something to the table for a vote or a motion. And if that were to pass and be approved, that would, we believe, give us enough time to deliver on at least what we're recommending to you as the board to be able to begin in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a phased-in approach or an all-in approach. So that's our presentations for this evening. Again, just things for you to consider. Thank you, Mrs. Drennan, and thank you, Mr. Cole. Wonderful presentation and very insightful. And I really thank you for your work over the last 2 weeks and what I charged you in doing and looking at every nook and cranny. Mr. Cole was on hands and knees with measuring tapes, and Mrs. Drennan was figuring out how to expand rooms. We were thinking about sledgehammers at one point. So thank you very much for your diligent work and bringing those scenarios forward. So we can move into the, Dr. Cohen, if you're okay, move into the personnel section of the meeting this evening. So under personnel, we do have a number of recommendations, and I'd ask Mrs. Galdo if you would please take items A through J. These were presented already in our work session meeting. We do have some new motions that I would ask K through N that you then take those afterward singularly to explain to the board.
Certainly. So as Dr. David Heiser said, items A through J, we're recommending approval of. These include extracurricular contracts, new hires, leaves as discussed at work session. So recommend approval of items A through J.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Wait, may I ask a procedural question?
Sure.
Clearly, these are talented people, and I stand behind them. Under the high school, there's a couple programs that I have some reservations about, which then would mean that I would not be in favor of a couple of the parties because of my reservations with some of those couple of those programs. Does that mean that I have to abstain from the vote? I mean, if we're taking them all in mass and I have a reservation about 2 or 3 of the high school programs that these parties will be running, do I have to abstain for the entire list?
Which ones are the ones, Alan, you have reservations about?
Some of the team sports.
Okay, tell me which ones.
The soccer, the football. I have some reservations about the team sports.
Okay, so they appear under item A, Alan.
Yes.
So that would be item A. You'd either be a no vote or abstain.
Right.
With regard to that. So we could take that and pull that one out and singularly do that as a motion. And Dr. Cohen, then you could take items B through J collectively if you wanted to do that.
Okay.
We take item A separately.
Okay. Do I have a motion for items B through J?
No, let's start with A. Take item A first.
Okay.
Singularly.
Do I have a motion for item A? Second?
Second.
If there's no discussion, move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion for items B through J?
So moved.
Second?
Second. Michael Barone.
Any questions or discussion? That moves to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? It's carried.
Galdo, would you take items K, L, M, and N and explain those to the board, and we can take those in mass as well.
Certainly. So item K is the approval of resignation of Sharon Franciosa, the current assistant principal at Pine Road. It's effective to be determined because we're conducting a search for her replacement. So we'll let her, we'll know when we hire her replacement when she'll be able to leave us.
And
Ms.
just for the
Francis,
board, just 1 second, Mrs. Guy, just for the board. And again, we want to wish Ms. Franciosa well. She has accepted a position and been appointed by the Board of School Directors for the Perkiomen Valley School District. And she is going to be the next principal at Evergreen Middle School. So she's going to be all sorts of green. And we're going to certainly miss Sharon. She's done a wonderful job over the past 7 years at Pine Road, and just a caring individual. And will be greatly missed, and will be a big loss within the building. So we do wish her well, and it's a great advancement for her, and near her home as well.
okay. Item L is a request to extend the family medical leave for Julie Dunphy, who's an instructional coach. Her extension is effective November 9th through December 3rd. And item M is a recommended approval of Brooke Mulroy as a 0.3 long-term substitute at the high school. So this is effective October 12th through the end of the school year. So Brooke is currently a 0.7 contract at Murray Avenue, and she's going to be covering the leave of Trudy Smith, whose leave is on the agenda earlier. So she's moved up to high school to cover Trudy Smith's leave, and then so we need to add on a 0.3 LTS to our 0.7 contract to make our whole for this coverage. Item N is recommended approval of Savannah Shields, a 0.7 long-term substitute at Murray Avenue, who is going to be taking Brooke Mulroy's 0.7 contract at Murray Avenue. That's effective October 21st through the end of the school year. So we have a little bit of a domino effect in our moves there.
Do I have a motion?
Items K through N.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or discussion? Not move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Carried.
Mrs. Drennan, would you take item A under curriculum?
Yes, I recommend the approval to attend professional meetings as attached.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Not move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? It's carried.
There are no action items under buildings and grounds. Under building, business and finance, Mr. McGuinn, would you take items A, B, and C, and then singularly, please explain item D, which is a new add since our work session.
Certainly. Like to recommend approval of items A, B, and C, the financial reports, checklists, and wire transfers, most of which has been spoken about at our work session.
I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Not move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? It's carried.
Item D, new to the agenda, we'd like to recommend approval of the Montgomery County CARES Act use of funds agreement between the Lower Moreland Township School District and the Montgomery County IU as per the attached. And once we have the motion in second, I can quickly explain what this is about.
Do I have a motion?
So moved, Michael Burry.
Second.
Second.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. As previously discussed with the board, the county as a whole had $15 million to distribute via Title I student formulas to each school district in Montgomery County. The Montgomery County Intermediate Unit helped us out, honestly, and is the facilitator of this grant. So the money has been transferred to the IU. All of our invoicing and reimbursements will come through Montgomery County IU, similar to what we do with their current IDEA program. Makes it a heck of a lot easier. Districts have a much more familiarity with that, and honestly, the county was very happy that the IU stepped in. So this is just the agreement to work with the IU.
What is the amount, Mark? Do you know?
It's roughly $135,000. Again, federal CARES Act could be used for sanitation, personal protective equipment, reimbursing districts for teachers, for substitutes who are in for teachers who are on the FFCRA leaves. So certainly helps. Doesn't cover everything, but certainly helps.
Thank you. Move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? It's carried.
Mr. Giordano, under Student Services, would you take item A, please?
Yes, I recommend approval of item A as previously discussed.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? If not, move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? It's carried.
We have no-
Technology?
We have no technology items this evening, so we'll move to school board. We'll take each of these items separately. So under item A, we recommend approval of dismissal from employment of employee number 1272.
Do I have a motion?
So moved, Michael Berardi.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? If not, move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Carried.
Under item B, we're recommending approval of the following new extracurricular contracts. Those have gone through the processes as we explained at our last work session meeting.
Do I have a motion?
So moved, Michael Berardi.
Second?
Second. Basil Bransky.
Any questions or discussion?
Murray, real quick, for maybe Mr. Cole on the line. Mr. DeGeorge is really working hard. All these are his extracurricular activities. What is this audiovisual tech coordinator? There's 110 approximate students involved, which is like 10% of Pine Road. Man, that's a lot of kids. What's he doing?
So Glenn is great. So he is able to offer some support of things like our Pine Road television and all of those audio visual things that we're able to do at Pine Road. Obviously, in a more traditional format, they support things like stage and those performances as well. But he's been really able to do a wonderful job of kind of pivoting some of those things into a virtual environment.
Okay. That's why there's so many kids, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, great. No, he's working hard.
Always.
Any other questions? Move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? It's carried.
Mr. McGuinn, would you take item C for us, please?
Certainly. I'd like to recommend approval of the attached parameters resolution in connection with a 2020 bond issue that was previously authorized at our last regularly scheduled board meeting in September.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any
Just quickly-
questions or discussion?
Just quickly, Mr. Kevin Reed was on. He sent me an email offline. He has the cell number. If anyone has any questions, I can certainly give him a call. But again, we have already discussed everything, so I didn't think. I think he addressed everything at our work session.
Move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Carried.
Dr. Cohen, real quickly, I will be at your residence for some bond signatures and patent. I'll have to figure out a way to get you to sign a few things related to that resolution. Thank you.
Okay.
Under item D, we're recommending approval of the Act 34 materials for the proposed new high school. Again, these were the materials under law that the hearing that we must hold as a school district related to the proposed new high school. These are all the materials that are published documents that go with that.
Moved. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? If not, move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Carried.
I'll abstain.
Okay.
Under item E, we're Related to the Act 34, we're recommending approval of the actual hearing date. And we actually need to take a motion to approve that particular hearing date, which we're scheduling for November 19th for the required Act 34 public hearing for the proposed new high school.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion or questions? If not, moves to a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Under item F, we are going to be recommending approval of utilizing both hybrid and virtual instructional models to begin the second marking period in 2020-21. As we discussed at our last work session, upon your approval, we also sought from our families any changes to the instructional model. So after we get to a second, Dr. Cohen, I am going to ask Mrs. Drennan to jump on, share her screen to share that data. She has a few slides to share the data to apprise the board of where we are with who has opted back into virtual or into hybrid, out back into virtual, and just some other documents she wants to share.
Do I have a motion? Second,
Second.
Julian, all yours.
Thank you. So this presentation might look familiar because it was shared at the work session prior to offering families the option to change their learning location for marking period 2. Following the work session, the Google form went out to all families, was open for a week. And here's an update on the numbers. Students moving from virtual instruction into our buildings for hybrid totaled 151 students. I think probably most of you may have predicted that the highest number would have been at Pine Road, and that would have been an accurate prediction. And then we also had students who moved from hybrid to virtual, with the greatest number of those students being at the high school for a total of 35 students. And just to compare where we were in marking period 1 compared to marking period 2, there's more of a shift in terms of the percentage of students in virtual versus hybrid. But in the rest of the buildings, we saw the hybrid actually increase. And so we're now still sort of at the 70-30%. We have 70% district-wide in hybrid and 26% in virtual. The students who are not accounted in those percentages are those that are with us 4 days in person by way of their IEP. So they're following a different program outside of the hybrid and virtual students.
Good.
Any questions for Julian?
Mrs. Drennan, do you want to share with the board? I'm sorry, Mrs. Natter.
No, just I assume that with this shift into hybrid, we're still able to maintain the appropriate distances.
We are. 6 feet will continue to be maintained, yes.
And we additionally have no staffing impact as well.
But this vote is basically maintaining the status quo that we presently have.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, Dr. David Heiser, or actually Mrs. Drennan, whoever wants to answer it. So obviously we're looking to make some changes, maybe November 30th, which will still fall in the second marking period. So obviously those who are in the hybrid model would be assumed to go into a 5-day unless they opted to go out, which they can do at any time. I'm assuming that we will only allow people who are in the virtual only to come back into the 5-day at the beginning of the third marking period, right? We're not going to allow a change if we end up approving a change in the middle of the second marking period.
We would, and we would allow that change to occur because it's a significant shift in our modeling. And in fact, you know, if the board were so inclined to approve any of the scenarios, most especially any of those that impact kindergarten and first grade, we would allow those families to relook at everything, make a determination, because our shift now eliminates a hybrid. It actually allows a 5-day and a virtual. And that's why it was very, very important through the scenario to really investigate what we thought the percentages might be. Mrs. Drennan and Mr. Cole looked at 80% and 85%. And we used those values and those percentages because of the original data we collected in late June from families versus the start of the school year really held. So we have an array of data, and we wanted to look at what might be the worst case scenario of families opting back in, so that we knew a staffing impact and we knew a spacing impact to that. So we would allow, because this is a significant change in the instructional model, allowing whatever grades it might be approved or not, to revisit their instructional model selection.
Including middle school and high school, because nothing.
No. Just any of the grades that would be impacted in any scenarios that the boards would so choose. No one else. Correct. Yes, we wouldn't get into any of the other grades with that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If no other questions, move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Legislative?
Very light, nothing to really speak of until the election really passes. There's not a whole lot going on in Harrisburg. The House and the Senate are both meeting this week for the final time before the election, but there's really nothing on the table that really would affect us as a school district that I can see.
Eastern?
Two big items for this month. The first is the final assessments came out. We had a percentage increase in enrollment. So based on our contributions, we're going up about 21,000 this year. The other item is that they will be going to a hybrid model starting November 5th.
For all students?
Yes.
IU?
Nothing to report on the IU.
Anything with technology?
Yeah, three quick updates. This is Dr. Hill. We had our council meeting last Thursday, October 15th. Just wanted to give the board and the public an update on the discussion topics across the county. The first topic was classroom hardware. More districts are moving to in-person hybrid models. And what we discussed was a wide-ranging, an array of solutions, from Chromebooks with webcams to mobile teaching stations on wheels, external USB cameras. And we also discussed a lack of technology devices available. It's a global shortage, which I'm going to speak to in just a moment, with an update for our specific devices. There was also a discussion about a significant increase, as you would imagine, of help desk tickets countywide. And how this impacts us is we've also seen an increase as we have more devices in students' hands than we ever have before, and more devices in staff and support staff and professional staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. With the approval this evening of Bobby Summers, our new technology assistant, I'm pleased to say that the technology team will be back to previous staffing levels, and this will allow us to better address the daily help desk tickets and technology challenges, but also move forward with projects and some of the proactive maintenance. And we're looking forward to that. And the third and final piece I alluded to already was the device shortage. It's impacting Montgomery County schools. It's also impacting other school districts in Pennsylvania and across the country. I had to have some great news to share that our Chromebook order from July was delivered today. This was originally scheduled for between January and March. So we'll be prepping and deploying those Chromebooks at Pine Road in a few days. And this is the final piece of the grant funded device purchases. And on the off chance that they're listening or see this, I want to thank Caleb Tyndall, our Dell account manager, and Darius Osborne, our Dell account executive, for their assistance. Dell has really stepped up to the plate in the spring, the summer, and the fall as we adjusted the new technology landscape. And we wouldn't have those devices this morning if it wasn't for their support. So a thank you to the Dell folks who helped us.
Dr. Hill, how many Chromebooks were delivered today?
Our order was 220. What this can allow us to do is issue the new Chromebooks to 5th grade who were using temporary devices, and those temporary devices. So it's a little bit of a helping all buildings by getting those devices. They'll go back into our support staff fleet, our loaners, and it'll make us whole at Murray Avenue in the high school as well. So we're very fortunate to have received those devices.
Oh, thank you.
Anything on Safe Schools?
We just had a recent meeting of our Community Safe School Committee, and our buildings have assembled and activated their threat assessment teams and preparedness. And, you know, under COVID and all the differing situations, this is something that still stays at our forefront. All of our buildings have worked through all of their, begun working through all of their fall drills and continue to do fire drills as well.
Thank you.
Dr. David Heiser, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
I guess it just popped into my mind when you brought up Safe Schools. If we were to go over to a 5-day in-person, I guess my question is how's all of our PPE holding up, and will we be okay if we get, because obviously we'll use more.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We don't use as many wipes down at the elementary level, right? They're self-contained, whereas secondary, we constantly between classes. So we are in good standing when it comes to all of our PPE and our cleaning products. We are constantly and continuing to order, and thankful for many opportunities that the community has given us and some of our parents, and as well as some of the grant opportunities that we've not had to take out of budget for that. So we're in real good standing when it comes to all PPE and cleaning equipment right now.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. DiMartino, any correspondences?
We have no correspondence.
Does anyone have anything else they wish to discuss before adjournment? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.